1 o'clock. So we're going to start. This is going to be a little bit different before I go into my intro. Is normally I disappear and it's just our author who's speaking, or sometimes there's two people up. Like last month, we had two short story writers, but this time I'm actually going to be doing the interviewing. So, hello everyone. I'm Glenda Carroll, and I've been the producer of these Facebook Saturday Lives for the last 2.5 years. So welcome to Northern California, Mystery Writers of America Facebook Saturday Live. And this is a place where authors, and these are mostly our local authors here in the Bay Area, present short, focused talks on the craft of crime. Today, our guest is Faye Snowden. And Snowden is a woman of many writing talents. I'm going to read from my notes so I don't screw this up. She's written poetry, short stories, as well as mysteries. This award-winning author has created a 4-part dark Southern Gothic series, and we're going to find out exactly what that is, because I want to know, with homicide detective Raven Burns as the protagonist. Now, the reason why Faye is here today is I read an interview with her on George Kramer's blog. And it said that she changes her approach with each book she writes. So I wanted to ask her about that because that interests me. Maybe it'll help me. So today's program is how I write what I write. Mm-hmm. And I have the pleasure of interviewing Faye. So if you have any questions on your Facebook page, on the comment section, put it there, and we will get to the questions towards the end of this. And so let's see. Okay, so let's start with the Southern Noir. Everything I've read about you, Faye, says that you write Southern Noir. Can you tell me what that is and what you need to include in your writing to make it Southern Noir?
Certainly. And then I don't know how we do this, but after the, maybe in the comments or somebody can go out there and look for an article for Crime Reads by Faye Snowden and put that in there. It'll tell you exactly what Southern Gothic and you can say noir is. Okay. But I'm gonna describe it, so don't worry. So okay. What that writing does, or what that genre of fiction does, is that it, just think of one word, duality, right? So it presents to the reader two different worlds, one that's beautiful and lovely on the surface, and one is just like very dark and ugly, and just like the underbelly. And those exist side by side in the same, and I'm gonna do a term we do in grad school, but in the same narrative space, but actually in the same work or the same book. So what it does though, is that it evokes a sense of anxiety in a reader that there's something more to the story that's in the subtext. So for example, in Attica Locke's book, and the name is escaping me, she describes in that first scene this huge, beautiful wedding on this plantation, right, with slavery and the horrors of slavery, but somebody's having a wedding and it's beautiful, the green rolling lush grass, the white dresses, the beautiful bridesmaids gowns, and everybody's sitting under the tree in their white chairs listening, and all of a sudden a snake falls out of the trees. Right, so that's anxiety. So the kind of just a few elements that I'm going to go over, and then there's a lot of those that are on the article that you can read, but things like the battle between good and evil is one of the things that you need to include in the Southern Gothic, or you'll find included in there. Another is the return of the past that you've repressed because it's ugly, right? Return of an ugly past. The other thing is corrupt religion. You'll find that often in Southern Gothic. I say that it's a favorite home of preachers in $5,000 suits. And then the other thing is that they usually take place in small towns that are, that duality, beautiful, rich, and then poor kind of things. And let me see, one more I want you to really, if I think of it, I'll let you know, but y'all, I'm old, so it'll change. It's slipping my mind, but if I think of it, I'll return. But that article kind of lays it out. So think of it as a pamphlet, that there are layers that you just peel back to discover more about, the society. It makes you question, institutions, your society, our norms and cultural values when you do the Southern Gothic work. I hope that wasn't too long.
That works. Yeah, thank you. I had no idea. So this was great.
Yeah.
So we'll get into sort of the meat of this. In George Kramer's blog, you mentioned that your writing process changes with each book. Can you explain that?
I can, and I will start by saying, as a writer, whatever you write, whatever process works for you is the right process. You may try on different processes or take different types of advice, but you're going to find one that works. And the reason that my writing process changes with each book, I was thinking about this question, Glenda, is because I'm a fraidy cat. I'm scared. And it's part of my procrastination. And so what happens is when I start writing, I usually do it in the form of a question. For the Raven Burn series, it's like how much of evil or bad things or sins are passed down from one generation to another. So that's the question I had. And then another thing that I do is usually the characters, and unfortunately, it's the bad guys, they come to me whole. So they, like Floyd Burns, kind of came to me and just started talking to me. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've got to write this guy. And then so I start with a question. I usually get my villain right away. And then for my other characters, I really have to work hard at developing them. I need to know what their wants are, what their conflicts are. Jess Lowry explains it, from her work as an A and a B story. Their A story, I believe, is what they want on the outside. I want to solve this murder so people stop getting murdered. But their B story is what they want on the inside. I want people to like me, right? So you got to, and then you know about, I do believe you have to get to know your main characters. What do they carry in their pockets? I think it was Anne Lamont who said, what are they like when they're sober? What are they like when they're drunk? What scares them? What kind of dreams that they have? Interview your characters. And I have a book right here. Oh, Bird by Bird, that has a great chapter on.
That's Annie Lamont.
How to get to know your characters. Okay, so I did that. I got my questions. I got my main character, my villain. I got my protagonist. And then that's when the procrastination set in. So I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I going to write this book? And so I'll go, should I do like write this novel in 90 days? Or should I have a book of the month? Should I try the book of the month method? And frankly, Glenda, is just a way of me being too afraid of that blank page. So and I brought all my books here, like I'm gonna see if you can see it on camera, but this is just like, I know it's blurry, but that is just a subset of books. But it's usually me trying to write the book faster and have less anxiety as I write the book, but it still takes me the same amount of time to write it, no matter which method I choose. And so it's just kind of getting me, I'm just trying to find a way to climb into that work. I will say that the best method that I have found, and I'm going to use again, is Jess Lowry's Book in the Bag. It's like a no nonsense, get that book written kind of method that I've used. And I used that on Killing Rain, which is up for an award, but I think that's the best method that'll get you out of your head. And yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, a question. This is not on the list of questions, but you were just talking about being a fraidy cat. And it takes me forever to write the first draft. And then I have something to work with and I'll work on it. But I mean forever, like a year, where I may go 2 or 3 months without doing anything. Mm-hmm. And then I have to get back into it. And I think it's that fear of like, I don't plan it out, so I have no idea where it's going. Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that somebody has written a book about just sit down and do it, shut up and just do it.
Yeah.
So what was the name of the last book that you said was very sort of no nonsense?
It's Jess Lowry's Book in a Bag, and I have to have it. And then I have to have it. I do. And then this is like an example of one. It's just like
it's actually in a bag.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then she has index cards in here, and it talks about your A story, your B story for your protagonist. You have your scene cards and It's a really good method just to get you out of your head. It's almost like, I don't know, my husband coaches baseball, and when I think about Jess Lowry's book in a bag, I always think about him saying to the team when they're messing up, he'll just look at the team and say, "Let's go." And then even now it's a joke. He doesn't coach baseball anymore, but it's a joke in our house that when you're just like in your head and not, you could just hear Eric, my husband, going, "Let's go." And that's what I feel about Jess Lowry's book in a bag. Now, I may start there, but the other thing that I do is I'm a really big fan of writing scenes, right? because a scene has to really touch a person. You have to use the 5 senses and stuff like that. So I do like a scene, like, what's the purpose of this scene? What's the lighting like? What's the entry line, the exit line? And so I have an outline scene card that I use that helps me keep on track as well.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. How do you develop your protagonist, like Floyd you're talking about? What do you think is important to know about him or her? And you've mentioned some of this, but before you start writing.
Yeah, Floyd was interesting because he came to me, like I said, fully grown. So to get to know him better, because I needed to, and I couldn't make any assumptions, is that I interviewed him. So I actually sat down and asked him a bunch of questions. And he's not a real person, right? I hope not, because he's not a very good person. But I asked him a bunch of questions, and then I answered them in his voice, right? So a lot of free writing for him. And one of the ways I tell people, especially with their villain, remember, in their eyes, they're not the villain, they're the hero. So try to have some, if you're writing a villain, try to have some empathy for what they're doing. Floyd was just a soulless, my brother-in-law, whom I just passed, I love very much. I've been thinking about him lately, Stan. But I don't know how they feel about cussing on here, but he would just say, Floyd's a bastard. And then he's just a terrible guy. But on your protagonist, I work a little bit harder because Raven did not come to me whole. So what I did was I just filled out a series of, when she was, her timeline, what she was like in high school, when she was born, her A and B story, those things like, what are her pet peeves, the things she hates, the things she likes, and another, you probably heard this one before, what does she carries in her pocket, or what does she carries in her purse? She does not carry a purse, which says a lot about her character. Does she believe in God? Does she have any brothers and sisters? What's her backstory? So just that, that's the way I developed my protagonist. I think it was Lamont has a really good thing about their acre, right? So every character, every person, I believe, resonated with me, has this garden that they tend, this figurative garden. And in that garden, they choose things they're going to grow, and they choose things that they're not going to grow. What do they tend in their garden? What do they care about? What do they want to keep out? Where are their boundaries? What are they not going to let in their garden? So I kind of think about it in that way too. So like for Raven's garden, she would never physically hurt a child, right? So that's one of the things that she keeps out that you'll never find in her character. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I like the garden.
I know, I like that analogy.
Feel for it. Yeah, that's really interesting. So you talked about Raven, you talked about the villain. What about some of the other characters show up? Are you that in depth with them as well?
With Raven's partner, Billy Ray? Yes.
Well, yeah, just whoever else, comes into the story.
It's so interesting. So I have a character named Imogene and some other characters. Oh, I love this guy. He was weird in the Killing Rain, but I just loved him so much. And again, this the trauma cleaner. And I'm just going to answer this on the fly and honestly as I can. I don't really go in depth with them, right? You'll never see me doing free write on Imogene, or you'll never see me interviewing Imogene. I think that the way I develop those characters are in relationship to the other characters. So by Raven and Billy Ray's interaction with the trauma killer, that the Willie Lee, right? Willie or whatever, you'll get to know him by his answers to them, his actions in the book, and I get to know him as well. And I think that's some books, you need that spontaneity, right? So that's the way I do my secondary characters as I think about it. That's a good question, Glenda. I never thought about that question. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking of the books that the Tricia Carson series that I've written, and the father has disappeared, walked out on the family, leaving Tricia, who had just graduated from high school, to take care of her younger sister, and then comes back into their life later. And, and him wanting to make amends for all this time where he let Tricia bring up basically his youngest daughter. And I made him kind of fun. First it wasn't very funny, and now he's funny. And I've had more people comment on the father saying, I really like him as a character. He's really caring, I can tell. And I went, I didn't know, it's sort of like I didn't think it out. This is just who he turned out to be. So I understand what you say. The editing process, I hate it. I really hate it.
That's what I love. Yeah.
I know. I remember reading that, and I want you to break down what you do during your editing process.
And this is such an excellent question. Somebody sent me a note this morning. They invited me to write a short story, which I was very grateful, but for an anthology. And the note said, how do you, kind of intimated, how do you feel about editing? I freaking love being edited by an editor. I love that collaborative process. And then it's almost like you're co-creating something. I mean, I wouldn't know what I would do without my editors. But the way I edit before it gets to them, because, show your work, you want to always show your editors and your agent your best work, is that I write that rough draft. And I wish I would have brought it with me. Sometimes I do it on yellow legal pad. I write my scenes. When I use the Jess Lowry book in a bag method, I take like my scene cards and I put them in a big bowl. And every time, bowls I steal from the kitchen and they get trouble for by my daughter-in-law and my husband. But what I do is I take that bowl and I get every time I write, I would just pull a scene card from the bowl and I'll write it. So everything's out of order, they're all jumbled together. So the first thing to me is putting that all into some type of coherent story, right? So that's my first editing. I'm not looking for style, tone, or anything. I'm just putting everything in order. The second time I read, I'm reading for basically story, like a developmental edit. And then I read it for tone and style, right? After I'm doing the developmental edit, making sure there's no plot holes or whatever. But then and making sure the story makes sense. And then I'm reading for tone and style, like, do I have a consistent voice for this one character? Is the tone of the book, is the narrative voice in the book the same all the way through? Like, am I talking like I grew up in Louisiana in one part of the book, and then the narrator talking about somebody from New York in the other part of the book? And if the narrator's talking about somebody from the Valley in California in the other part. So I make sure that's all consistent. And then I believe at that point I have a story. And then what I do is, and this is even when I'm sending something to my agent or my editor, because I want to show them my best work, is that I go through and do a line edit for grammar problems and awkward sentences and that type of thing. And I heard somebody say it would drive them crazy to read their book 4 or 5 times after they write it, but I just don't know any other way to do that. So if somebody has another way to do that, just let me know. But I'm reading it at least 5 times. My final read, I'll go to a coffee shop, I'll print that puppy out, I'll sit down at a table and I'll just read it in one sitting. Like, it takes me like 5 to 7 hours, sometimes 8 hours if I'm going slow.
Wow.
Yeah.
You brought up something that, again, it's not on the list of questions, but it's a little bit more about your background. I wonder if you can talk about that. You said you're from the Deep South. Mm-hmm. Have you been reading all the time? And how did you decide you wanted to be a writer? And then how did you get your agent? How did you get to be published? A lot of us are in that stage where we don't have either of those. And it's like, well, I've got the book, but what do I do now?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is be persistent and don't give up. And I know that's like may sound trite and cliche, but I'm serious and I'll tell you why. So I grew up in the Deep South. I've always read. I have come from a family of writers. My dad is a rhythm and rhyme poet. He's a good writer. I have an aunt named Ruby Berkeley Goodwin, who in 1953 wrote a book called It's Good to Be Black in 1953.
Wow.
And then she was also secretary to Hattie, the woman who played in Gone with the Wind. I have great uncles. I've not met them, but you know, probably when I was little, but they've written for Gunsmoke. And so writing has been like this miasma. It's been all around me since I was growing up. And then, you know, I didn't have a great childhood. So the way I escaped is I read everything. I think at 13, I read Toy Story. Was it, who wrote Anna Karenina?
Was it Anna Karenina?
Yeah, was that?
Tolstoy.
Yeah.
Dostoevsky.
Oh my goodness, I love that book. Yeah. And then I was reading things like Sylvia Plath, and that was just a way that I escaped. And then and I tell the story a lot, but what I saw in the books that I read and the TV shows that I watched, the poems I read, there was not a lot of people that looked like me. And I felt that the women characters as well were these weak kind of, and I knew strong women in my life. My mom was a very strong woman. So I knew them, and it was like, where are all the strong women? So I started writing really to write myself into the narrative, to write people like me into the stories that I read. So some other, you know, little girl who may be having a hard time or just may want to escape for a few hours can read a book and see someone like herself in the book. So that's how I came to write. And I love language and fiction and all kind of books.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to the agent publisher a little bit.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. So this is actually the next question. Making the transition from writing for yourself, which I'm assuming as a reader, you may have started scribbling around. How did you change to want to write for an audience that would pay for your books? And how did you find a publisher? How long did it take? And what about an agent?
When I divide my writing into two periods, that was from like 1999 to 2008. It was easy. I think I found my agent on my third or fourth try, and I found my book publisher on my like third or fourth try. Okay. Fast forward, and I was just lucky. That was just plain luck. Fast forward to now, you know, in the last few years, it took me, I think, 150 tries to find my agent. And it took us just as long, maybe the agent stuck with me to find the publisher. However, I will say, if you're looking for an agent, the first thing you do is you treat it like a job. Right? Don't be precious about it. You write you have to write a synopsis, first write the best book that you can. Write the best book. Read it 5 times, write the best book that you can. And then after that, write your synopsis. There's all kinds of websites on there, how to write a synopsis, write your query letter, make sure it's a good query letter. Don't be cute in your query letter, but don't also agonize so much over it that you never send it. And then do a research. Like if I were applying for a job, I'm a tech person, right? I'm in IT. I wouldn't go like your profession, Glenda. I wouldn't go and say, I want to be a communications professional, or I want to be an astronaut. You know, don't do that. You know, you cannot be an astronaut. Go and find the agent, research the agent that published your type of work, and then, you know, apply like a job, very professional to those agents. Another thing is don't trash agents when they reject you and that type of thing, because it may not have anything to do with your work. And then, so the agent, after you find your agent, then they will help you find the publisher, and then they will work with you. This is traditional publishing, by the way. I don't have time to do the indie publishing, self-publishing, just because of my day job. And then they'll help you find the agent, and you go from there. So, and then how do you take that book that you're writing for yourself and you're having fun? Oh my goodness, I love this. And then writing it for an audience. I believe that's where the editing process comes in. And then that's when it's becoming a product that you're going to sell on a market. So again, you have to find some distance between that product and what you first created, right? Your book ain't your baby. I wrote a blog post called 5 Ways Your Books Ain't Your Baby for the Wicked, but I really believe that it is not your baby. And then another thing, it is not you. I mean, I do requests for proposals in my job. I set up systems and stuff. You don't see me going around to the server and going, oh my goodness, that's the best server anybody ever did. And look how I did this. You know, you have to, if you're going to sell to the market, you still write what you want and do the best you can, but there has to be some type of, when you step over that line and it becomes a business. And then if you don't sell that content to a publisher or an agent, you can repurpose that content, do something else with it, do indie public, put it on a blog, take it down into a short story, find innovative ways to use it. So that's my soapbox. I'll get off now, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to look and see if we've gotten any questions.
Okay.
And to those who are watching, normally I'm right on top of this, but I'm not on screen, so I have a chance to look.
Okay.
All right. This is from Erin Crowley, and it's just a comment, but I think we can all relate. It says, I'm editing my first novel now, and I'm actually enjoying it. Good for her. I don't do that, but it's taking so much longer than I anticipated. Do you find that to be the case?
I think I'm like you, Glenda. I find that getting that first draft down is the longest part of my work. When I'm editing, that's the fastest part. So, but I can relate when it comes to writing that first draft. And we're all different people, right? All different types of writers and everything. So it's like, it's going to be different for everybody. Yeah.
Okay. Back to, and if you have any questions, put them in the comment section. Mm-hmm. But I've got a few more, and we're quickly moving through our time. This goes really fast when you're on this end of it. When I'm on the back doing the tech work, it doesn't seem to move this fast. Okay. So you've written in a number of different genres. You've written short stories, you've written poetry. Can you tell us we've talked about what they are, but does one genre help the other?
I believe that it does. I am experimenting with short stories, and I'm having so much success. It's kind of scary in that area. Because I didn't think I was really that good at it. And when I'm writing a short story, it's usually for my friends. If somebody was like Misty Berry, who I respect and she's and admire so much, asked me to write a short story for Low Down Dirty Vote. And I did that short story for Misty. I'm like, this is for Misty. I don't care what happens to it. I want it to be successful. And now that's going to be put in BAM's Best American Mystery and Suspense of 2022. But I like shorts. You asked me a question. So I like short stories because they force you to be concise, and they force you to sharpen your work, right? Sometimes in novels, we get really flowery. We do things because they're fun and not that they're part of the story. But a short story requires you to tell about the life of a person in 2 or 3 sentences, or tell you what a person is like in 2 or 3 sentences. And that's really fun for me. So that's what I think that's why I want to get better at short stories, so I can get better in my long fiction. Now for poetry, I had somebody, because for National Poetry Month, we're in April, and on Twitter every day I'm just like posting poems that I think people will like. And one of an author who I admire, Mark Westmoreland, was saying, I hate poetry in another post. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm trying to make him like poetry. I'm trying to turn him to the dark side. But I think what poetry does, especially good poetry, and I can't say that word, so excuse me, but good poetry and a good writer knows that a poem is not just sometimes it's very, there's images, there's a lot of beautiful language. But for me, good poetry has a narrative behind it. Each word matters to what that poem is trying to say. And again, with that, and it's the unexpected in a poem, right? The unexpected that catches us just out of nowhere and to me tugs at our heartstrings. The unexpected, the unknown, the use of the language. And the poem, I think a good poem has to have a strong narrative. A lot of people disagree, but what is it about? It has to be about something. What is it saying about the human condition or the universe or the world? Now, the way that helps in your novels is it helps you, again, sharpen. It helps you, in some of your prose passages, look for the unexpected. And it reminds you that even though this is a beautiful passage in your work, it still has to relate to the story or the narrative that you're trying to tell, right? I mean, we've all had those poems we wrote when we were kids or read a poem by a person, but it's just all this language and, despair, and it doesn't really talk to anything, right? And that's why I think one of the reasons that it's not something that will resonate or be a good poem. So that's a long answer to a big question.
Okay, all right, let me just check here. Okay, this is from our chapter president, Claire Johnson. She said, any tips on distancing your ego from your editing process, i.e., that bouncing back and forth between believing in your words and then distrusting what you've written, especially in this age of rejection? Good question, Claire.
Yeah, I think distancing your ego, one of the ways that I've done it, and it's going to sound pretty corny, but one of the ways I've done is to think about my reader. Think about, who am I doing this for? I think, and I didn't say this, but I think I heard this somewhere, but I totally believe in it. I'm writing the first draft for me. Right. That's when I'm going to play on the page. And if I was in like a little pond, I'm like throwing the water up in the air, throwing the flowers. I'm playing my ASS off. Right. And then I'm probably kind of doing that in the second and third draft, but probably like the third draft, I'm getting serious. And I'm thinking about my readers. I'm thinking about Misty, who I admire so much. Is she going to understand when I put this in the story? Is it going to be confusing to her? This sentence is kind of awkward. How is that? I don't have an ideal reader, by the way, but I'm just using that as an example. But think about the distance yourself. Think about how, and I don't care about the impact on the reader, but is the reader going to be blown away by this? Is they going to understand what's going on? Is it going to help them like the story more? And then that's how I distance myself. But like the first couple of drafts, I'm playing like a mother. and then on my last draft, when I'm co-creating with my editor, then they're helping me refine it. But when that book goes to market, that's not my book anymore. I don't care. It's a relationship between the reader and the work. So I think if you look at it as a continuum, I think the first couple books are for you, and then you don't need to distance yourself. But as you go through those drafts and get to your editor, that's when it's becoming more like a product. So I would just say the tip that I have is to distance yourself, think about the impact, or think about the reader, not the impact, but is the reader going to understand the words that are coming out of your pen, right? Yeah.
Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, I've got one more last question. And in the blog that I read, George's blog, you mentioned that writers should be readers. And also we have to study the craft. I want to know how you do it, because I gave you an example before. I tried to do that. I was reading, I think it was like a Michael Connelly book, because I really like the Bosch series that he does. I think it's well done. And I decided I was going to outline it as I read. Okay. I did that probably for the first 2 chapters or so. And then I got so interested in the story, I forgot about it. That's one thing. I don't seem to be able to analyze as I do it. The other thing is I don't have the time that I used to read. So do you do this, and how do you do it? Are you able to read as much as you would like?
Yeah, not as much as I would like, but the way that I read is or consume work is I do it in several different formats. So there's audible.com. So when I go on my walks, and I consider that a form of consumption, I consider it reading. Some people don't. It's cheating. Okay, so but I'll do that out when I go for my walks. I'll put it on when I'm cleaning the kitchen. I'll put an Audible book on to read. Another thing that I do is like, 15, 20 minutes for bedtime. I try to, and I read really dark stuff. Sometimes I have nightmares. Gabino Iglesias gave me nightmares. So sometimes I'll read like 15, 20 minutes before I go to bed. The other thing about reading to learn the craft is that one time when I was trying to figure out how to write a book, some genius had an idea. They said, you know what? I'm going to teach you how to be a really good writer. I want you to take your favorite book in the whole wide world. And at that time, mine was Old Man and the Sea. And I want you to write down every word in a book, in a notebook, and outline it and do that. I don't believe in that. That was and I tried it like for a week and I'm like, no, this is not working for me. So what I do to learn about a book, whether the book is resonating with me or not when I'm reading, is that I'll look at things that work, what really works in this book. And then when it's a bad book, I look at things that didn't quite work. And then I say, well, Faye, why didn't that work? Why do you think that's not working? Because they just went into 2 pages of backstory that has nothing to do with the story that's taking place, right? Or that dialogue is stiff, or nobody would ever say that, or this is too cliche. I saw this on a movie 2 weeks ago, the same type of, so that's how I use books to understand the craft. I look at what's working and what's not working. I don't analyze or anything like that. For studying the craft, and Lori Rader Day has posted, I think on Facebook, that she has a lot of, she's reading Annie Lamott right now. I just like pick your favorite book for craft, read it. And then sometimes that gets me inspired as well. There are these short videos for like Sister in Crime, have webinars, and some of them are short that you can do. These Facebook Lives, maybe when you're having your morning coffee, pull one up about writing a short story. Art Taylor did something with short stories for Sisters in Crime, and just do it, like kind of attach it to something else that you're already doing. And that's what I try to do. I'm not always successful at it, and I'm far, far, far from perfect, but those are the things that I do in order to keep abreast of the craft.
Well, our time's up. I wish it wasn't, but it is. I just want to thank you so much, Snow. I've been really Faye.
No, you're fine.
I'll figure out your name eventually.
No, my son, they call him Snow. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I find it really helpful for me. And I certainly like the way you kind of handle the drafts. That's something I think I really can use. Mm-hmm. So to all of you out there who spent part of your day with us, I appreciate you being here. Certainly, Faye, I want to thank you again.
You're welcome.
And just for your information, almost like within 5 minutes after we sign off here, this is on the NorCal page, the Facebook page that you're looking at, the NWF page. So you can always go back and look at this at any point. And we have 2 years worth of these Facebook Saturday Lives up there that talk about the craft of crime. It talks about dialogue, it talks about character, and like we did last month, short stories. So, I encourage you to go take a look. If there's something up there, or you're looking for something and it's not there, let me know and we can do it. So I just want to tell you a little bit about next month, which will be Saturday, May 13th. And the topic is characters who aren't people, or when places play a role. And the guest is me. I write a lot about places. I included a lot in my stories. I write about the Bay Area and what it's like going over the Golden Gate Bridge and all kinds of seasons that seem to connect with the character, I hope. I'll be interviewed by Vera Chance. I'm looking forward to that. So if you are tired of listening to me on this end, you can be tired of listening to me being interviewed. But anyway, so I'm next month. Again, thank you everyone for spending some time with us, and I will see you then.
Adios.
Thank you, Faye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.